Hello, and welcome to UKPF Extra. Through the annals of history, people have seen unexplainable lights in the sky, the kind of phenomena that we commonly refer to as UFOs. This episode is the third of a series where we look through a number of these historical accounts, with the focus of this episode being to look at reports from mainstream newspapers in Australia and New Zealand. If you missed the initial two episodes, I shall link to them in the description section below this video. After witnessing a phenomenon in the sky last night, a Gisborne resident is convinced that there may be something in the story of flying saucers allegedly seen in America some time ago. Cycling along Childers Road at 9:20 PM yesterday, she saw appear above Kaiti Hill two circles of iridescent light, one almost transposed on the other. The circles rapidly became larger and could be seen to be spinning in an anti-clockwise direction. Describing a semicircular course, the two circles faded out in a northeasterly direction. The lights, which she described as being like two circlets of fluorescent tubular lighting, were visible for about 10 seconds. Melbourne, Saturday. Two teenage girls, usually gay and happy, are spending sleepless and restless nights after what they claim was a horrible experience. The girls are Jeanette Brown, 16, and Jeanette Johnston, 13, both of Dandenong, a Melbourne outer suburb. Both girls are a bundle of nerves and refuse to leave their homes at night alone. Their reason for barring themselves behind closed doors is a fear they will be attacked from people from another world. Last Saturday night, the girls claim a flying saucer hovered less than 20 yards above their heads. The girls were by themselves on a lonely road in Dandenong when they saw the object. The girls' mothers said this week the experience had seriously affected the children. Mrs. Johnstone said, "My girl has been very nervy and restless. She wouldn't tell me a lie. I believe her story." Mrs. Johnstone said her daughter hoped the story would not be published, in case the object attacked them. Her daughter had asked her to move to another suburb because she feared the saucer might try to destroy her home and family. Jeanette Brown saw the saucer first. This is what she said. "Shortly after 6 PM, I left my home to meet Jeanette Johnston. I was standing outside the main gate of a partly built factory on Prince's Highway, waiting for Jeanette. I heard a loud drumming noise, something like a motorcycle. I looked towards the factory, and hovering over the top of the end dome of the building, I saw a large dark shape. I flashed my torch in its direction, and it came towards me. And three lights, one on top and two on the ends, lit up. I thought they were rays and fell to the ground." Jeanette said, "I was terrified. It was terribly weird and fascinating. I just couldn't move or even run away. I was so scared. Then it came towards me and stopped, hovering about 20 yards away on the top of the factory gate, as if it deliberately wanted me to look at it, or it wanted to look at me. It was a cylindrical shape, about 30 foot long and 15 foot high, with a canopy and window on top and a window on each end. I was so close I could even see how it worked. The undercarriage consisted of 3 wheels, which were half turning and making a low clicking sound. Just then a car came along the road. The saucer must have heard it or seen the approaching lights, because it swung around and settled behind a caretaker's house. At this stage, Jeanette arrived to meet Janet, who told her to watch the house. Jeanette said, "As I watched the house, a silvery coloured cylinder rose into the air. It stayed there hovering for about 2 minutes, and then swept away in a wide circle to another factory a few hundred yards away. It stayed on top of the factory for about 1 minute, where the bright lights flashed out and only the top and left lights kept shining. Suddenly, the left light spun around to the right-hand side of the saucer, and it crossed the road and disappeared behind the trees." Denver, Friday. Flying saucers piloted by little men from another planet would land on the Earth within a year. Silas Newton, geophysicist, told a Denver University class today. "These men of a foreign planet have been sounding the Earth's magnetic fields in exploratory flights," he said. Newton declared that 4 flying saucers which had crashed on the Earth were being studied by the United States government. A 5th had now crashed in Africa. The bodies of 34 men, ranging in height from 38 to 42 inches, had been taken from the wrecks. Newton believes the saucers are interplanetary spaceships, operated along the lines of magnetic force. They dare not land until they safely map the magnetic fields of this planet, he said. "I think that reported mass flights of saucers are evidence that the magnetic fields have been pretty thoroughly sounded, and the saucers are now ready for landing. These men from a foreign planet, probably advanced beyond our scientific state by hundreds of years, have harnessed lines of magnetic force for propulsion, like we harness the propelling powers of steam, oil and jet." Newton added that this made possible flying the 181 million miles from Venus in about 1 hour. Constable Overton, while on patrol in the direction of Bombay last week, accompanied by a trekker, all at once felt a pain and a heavy strain at the back of his neck, while the horse itself staggered as though about to fall, reports an exchange. The shock passed away almost as quickly as it came, and the next thing he noticed was the breaking away of the tent of a digger named Logan, close at hand, which was carried up in the air like a pocket handkerchief, torn into ribbons and left entangled on the top of one of the highest trees. The contents of the tent, bedding, clothing, boots, buckets and cooking utensils, were scattered in all directions hundreds of yards away, and immediately after there was a noise in the distance, like the explosion of a mine. Nothing could be seen in the air. Doubtless, it was an electric current of some sort, although there was not the slightest sign of thunder or of lightning about. The time was a little after 12 noon. Braidwood, however, is a district notable for wonderful happenings of a kind which don't occur anywhere else. Mrs. Victor Farrell of Moparaba had an unusual experience on Monday afternoon when she saw 2 shining objects gliding over the treetops about half a mile from her home, which is about 24 miles west of Kempsey. The objects, which appeared to be made of aluminium, shone like burnished silver and appeared to be about 6 feet long and 4 feet wide, said Mrs. Farrell. Mrs. Farrell, in reporting the matter to the Macleay Argus, said the first object came into view about 3:50 p.m. and glided with an undulating motion in a southerly direction. Just 10 minutes later, at 4 p.m, a similar object came into view and followed the same direction as the first, till it disappeared from sight. "I never thought I would live to see a flying saucer," said Mrs. Farrell, "but these two objects certainly did not resemble aircraft, and I heard no sound." Mrs. Farrell said she had called her granddaughter, Miss Margaret Crotty, from the house to witness the phenomena, and Miss Crotty was equally astounded and mystified by the unusual sight. Mrs. Farrell said the objects appeared to be about half a mile from her home, gliding rather than flying, and travelled at a much slower pace than modern aircraft. Mr. Dom O'Neill, Kempsey Aerodrome, when informed of the incident, promptly rang Coffs Harbour Aerodrome, but the officer there said he had no knowledge of any aircraft that would be in the vicinity of Mop Araba yesterday afternoon. Mr. J. Faulkner, OC at Coffs Harbour, contacted headquarters in Sydney. Mr. Hepburn, Regional Director of Civil Aviation, said the authorities were very interested in the reports made by Mrs. Farrell and asked that she be requested to forward a written statement on the matter, which Mrs. Farrell has agreed to do. Mr. Hepburn said a special committee had recently been appointed to investigate reports of unusual objects in the sky following receipt of several well-authenticated reports of unusual and unidentified objects in the sky at various points on the north coast and on Queensland's coast in recent weeks. To the editor of the Ovens and Murray Advertiser. Sir, noticing the deep interest taken in your psychological leader, and which is a pleasant variation to the general reading, I hope for a little space to introduce another subject which seems to be without an explanation by scientists. When travelling one night late from Barnawarva to Brown's Plains in a buggy, I saw in a paddock, on my left, what appeared to be a fairly large fire, about 200 yards from the road. As soon as I noticed it, it started coming towards me. In about half a minute, it was alongside the buggy, and so scared the horse that he made a bound into the waterhole across the road, nearly overturning the buggy. Having the horse to manage, I could only look sideways at the fire, which appeared to be a round ball the size of a bicycle wheel, and it travelled alongside the buggy for over 100 yards, the heat being so intense as to cause me to hold up my arm to guard my face. Before I could exactly tell how it happened, it was over in the paddock again and remained stationary. On another occasion, I went down to the lagoons on the Murray Flats to shoot water rats. I stayed till about 12 o'clock at night. When coming home, I took a shortcut through a paddock diagonally, as I lived at the opposite corner of it. The paddock was a mile long, and when about 100 yards in the paddock, I saw a possum on a dead tree. I stopped to shoot it, and at the same time I noticed a fire about 100 yards off. The night was a bright moonlit one, and the ground was white with frost. I sauntered towards the fire to have a warm, but when looking I found I was no nearer the fire. I quickened my pace, watching the fire as I did so, and found it was travelling at my own rate of speed away from me. Connecting it with the previous experience, I determined to investigate the matter. It appeared to be a fire about the size of a large kitchen fire, but I could only judge by the glow as it appeared to be on the other side of a log. It was on the ground and always seemed to keep this log between itself and me. Instead of going diagonally across the paddock, it led me down within a chain of one side. Determined to come within range of it, I tried various ways of stalking it, as I was determined to put its lights out if possible. When I ran, it outpaced me. When I walked slowly, it went slowly. We were close to the bottom of the paddock, where the main Holong Road to Chiltern lies, when it suddenly turned to my left, as if it did not wish to be cornered. I had tried stalking it behind trees, but it was too wary. and when I looked round the tree, it was further off than ever. When it turned to my left, it was in the best position I had yet discerned it, and I stood quite still. It was within 50 yards of me, stationary, but still kept the confounded obstruction between me and itself. It lit up the surrounding saplings for 20 yards, and although there was not a breath of wind, it caused such a vibration in the atmosphere as to cause the leaves and branches of the saplings to quiver and swing overhead. I watched it for fully 10 minutes. When I again advanced, it did the same. I followed it to the other corner of the paddock, where I had first intended to make for. When we neared this corner, it again turned to the left and started for the top of the paddock, when I left it to its own devices. Now, can any of your readers explain this? But for goodness sake, let us not have the scientist hackneyed answer of luminous germs, gaseous exhalations, etc., as in both cases there was no swampy ground within a mile or two, and that the Murray River. It was evident they both had heat by the quivering of the branches of the one, and my personal experience of the other. Was there any psychological connection between the fire and the observer? Hoping for your leniency in thus encroaching on your space, I remain yours, etc., Veritas. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click the like button and leave me a comment down below. If you think your friends and family would enjoy this video too, why not give it a share on social media using one of the buttons below this video. I have 2 channels now, this one and UK Paranormal Files, so if you haven't already, please give both channels a subscribe. A button to subscribe to each should be appearing on the screen in just a moment. And as always, all that's left for me to say is, thanks very much for watching.